The radio crackled once, and then went dead. Not the normal kind of dead either, no static, no fading signal. Just gone, like the mountain itself had swallowed the sound. I remember standing there in the dark, snow crunching under my boots. My breath coming out too fast, too loud. Something felt off in a way I can't really explain. Not danger like a storm rolling in. Not fear like when you hear an animal nearby. This was different. It felt like being watched by something that didn't need eyes. Up on the ridge, my headlamp caught a shape in the snow that made my stomach drop. 3 sets of footprints, and then only 2 coming back. No struggle, no blood, just clean, deliberate. Steps that stopped at the edge of a drop that no sane climber would ever approach at night. The wind wasn't howling like it usually does up there. It was quiet, way too quiet. Even the forest had gone still, like it was holding its breath. That's when I realized this wasn't a rescue call anymore. Whatever happened to those climbers had already happened. Down whatever was still out there knew I was standing in its territory. And before I can explain how I ended up in that moment, you need to understand who I am and why it's taken me this tied up inside to finally talk about it. Asterisk. I've been a park ranger for a long time. Long enough that the uniform feels more like a second skin than something I put on for a shift. Long enough that I know the difference between normal fear and the kind that settles deep in your gut and doesn't leave. I've worked rescues in wide-out blizzards, pulled boadies out of ravines after bad calls, and spent nights alone in ranger stations where the wind makes the walls groan like they're alive. None of that prepared me for what happened on Mount Rainier. People like to think this job is just hiking trails and giving directions to tourists who don't know how fast weather can flip up here. That's not how it really works. Up on this mountain, mistakes don't get second chances. You learn to respect the terrain, the cold, and the silence. I've had weeks where I barely saw another human face, just endless snowfields, black timberlines, and that massive peak looming over. Everything like it's watching you move. I'm not telling this story because I want attention. Honestly, if it were up to me, I'd keep my mouth shut forever. Rangers are trained to stay professional, to stick to reports and facts, to not let emotions bleed into the job. But there are some things you carry long enough that they start eating at you. And when you realize no one else is ever going to warn people, you start feeling responsible in a way that's hard to shake. There are stories about Mount Rainier that never make it into brochures or safety briefings. Stuff we joke about around campfires, stuff old-timers mention with a nervous laugh, and then change the subject. You hear things your first year and brush them off as stress or superstition. After all, when you're exhausted, cold, and running on caffeine, your brain can mess with you. That's what I told myself for years. But the night those climbers went missing changed that. It crossed a line I didn't even know existed. After that call came in, after what I saw and what I was told not to write down, I realized there are parts of this mountain we don't control, parts we barely understand. And yeah, maybe that sounds crazy coming from someone who's supposed to be the calm, rational one in an emergency. But I've replayed it in my head 1,000 times, and the details never change. I'm telling you this now because people still climb Rainier thinking it's just ice, rock, and bad weather. They don't think about what the mountain feels like. At night, when the crowds are gone and the dark settles in heavy and close. Before I get into that call, Before I tell you what those climbers walked into, you need to understand what Mount Rainier turns into after the sun goes down, and why. Every ranger up there learns to listen to the silence. Mount Rainier at night is a whole different animal. During the day, it's loud, in its own way, boots crunching, radios chirping, climbers calling out to each other. But once the sun drops and the last headlamps disappear down the trail, the mountain shuts its mouth. The silence up there isn't peaceful. It's heavy. It presses in on you from all sides, like the dark itself has weight. The cold hits different too. It's not just freezing, it's sharp, like it's trying to cut through your layers and remind you who's really in charge. Your breath sounds too loud in your own ears, and every step feels like it echoes farther than it should. Even the snow feels wrong sometimes, packed tight in places it shouldn't be, soft and sinking in spots that make no sense. You start second-guessing everything, even ground you've walked 100 times before. The wind is what really messes with you. It doesn't howl non-stop like people imagine. It comes and goes in slow waves, almost like breathing. And when it stops completely, that's when your skin starts to crawl. No birds, no insects, no distant cracking ice, just dead stillness. Rangers talk about that silence in low voices, usually with a joke to cover it up, but everyone knows it means some things. There are moments up there where you feel watched, plain and simple. Not like an animal tracking youth, those signs are obvious if you know what to look for. This is different. It's the sense that if you turned around too fast, you'd catch something ducking back out of sight. You don't see it. You just know. And yeah, I told myself it was fatigue, altitude, too much caffeine, and not enough sleep. That's what you tell yourself if you want to keep doing the job. Mount Rainier also plays tricks with sound. A rock shifting half a mile away can sound like footsteps right behind you. Ice cracking deep inside a glacier can feel like something moving under your feet. Your radio carries voices weird up there, stretching words, swallowing parts of sentences. Sometimes you swear you hear your call sign when no one's transmitting. Most nights, you shake it off and keep moving. But there are other nights. Nobody really talks about where the mountain feels alert. Like it knows exactly where you are. Your instincts start screaming for no clear reason, and every survival lesson you've ever learned tells you to stay put, stay quiet, and don't draw attention to yourself. That's the kind of night it was when the call came in. I remember standing in the station, staring out at that massive dark shape against the sky, feeling that familiar unease settle in, the kind that tells you something bad is already in motion. And right as that feeling hit, the radio crackled to life with a transmission that made my stomach drop. 3 climbers were overdue. And the details of that call didn't sound right at all. The call didn't come in loud or panicked like you'd expect. It slipped through the radio almost casually, which somehow made it worse. Dispatch said 3 climbers were overdue from a late ascent route, experienced guys, solid permits, the kind that usually check in early and don't screw around. At first glance, it sounded routine. People underestimate Rainier all the time. But then the details started stacking up, and none of them sat right with me. Their last check-in was hours earlier than expected. Not a weather update, not a status report, just a short transmission that cut off mid-sin and snow distress code. No follow-up. Their GPS ping showed them stopping in a spot that didn't make sense. Well off the normal line, nowhere near a camp or a turnaround point. And the weirdest part? Their emergency beacon hadn't gone off. If 3 seasoned climbers were in trouble, at least one of those systems should have been screaming by now. I remember leaning back in my chair, staring at the map, tracing their route with my finger. My gut was already telling me this wasn't just a delayed descent. You do this job long enough, you learn to trust that feeling, even when you can't explain it. The mountain had gone quiet in that way I hate, and the timing was all wrong. Too late in the night, too cold, too still. We tried raising them directly. Nothing. No static, no interferency, just dead air. Another ranger cracked a joke about batteries dying in the cold, but nobody laughed. You could feel it in the room, that subtle shift when people stop pretending everything's fine. Outside, the wind tapped against the windows, slow and steady, like someone knocking without wanting to be let in. As protocol kicked in, we started logging gear, checking weather windows, lining up personnel. Everything by the book. But there was this unspoken tension hanging over us. Someone asked where their last known position was again, and when I repeated it, the room went quiet. One of the older rangers shook his head and muttered something under his breath. I didn't ask what. He meant I didn't want to hear it. The clock kept moving, and with every passing minute, the odds dropped. We hit the trail just as the moon slipped behind a thick cloud, plunging everything into a darkness so complete it felt like the mountain was swallowing us whole. The snow beneath our boots was crunchy but uneven, and every step was a gamble. You can't just walk Mount Rainier like any other trail, especially not at night when the temperature drops and the wind turns into a sneaky beast that cuts through every layer you've got on. The terrain was unforgiving. One wrong step and you're staring down a crevasse or tumbling into a ravine nobody would find until spring thaw. Our headlamps flickered weakly against the shadows cast by the jagged rocks, and every sound seemed amplified the snap of a twig. The distant shift of ice, even our own breathing felt loud in the stillness. The silence out there isn't peaceful. It's like the mountain itself is watching, waiting for you to make a mistake. We moved fast, but careful, checking every ledge, every outcropping. The snow had melted weirdly in places, leaving patches of slick ice that made the climb tricky. I kept thinking about the climbers where they could have gone off track, what could have stopped them cold. But as we pushed deeper, a gnawing unease crept in that wasn't from the cold or the dark. It was like something was out there with us, not close enough to see, but close enough to feel its presence. One of the younger guys whispered he thought he saw something move out of the corner of his eye. I told him it was just a trick of the light, but inside I was questioning it too. These mountains have a way of messing with your head, playing games with your senses when you're already on edge. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was different. It wasn't a shadow or a trick. It was something watching, something waiting. Then we hit the first signs that things weren't right. The climber's tracks stopped suddenly at their edge of a steep drop-off. No sign of struggle, no equipment left behind, just a sharp end like someone vanished into thin air. My heart sank. I know the mountain can be brutal, but this was something else. It didn't follow any pattern I knew. We called out, but the only response was the echo of our own voices swallowed by the vastness. The radio went dead again, same as before, and the cold tightened its grip on the night. We kept moving, but every step felt heavier, like the mountain was trying to push us back. I won't lie, that night changed something inside me. It was the kind of fear that doesn't scream or run, it settles in quiet and deep, twisting your thoughts until you start doubting what's real. And just as we pressed on, trying to piece together what happened to those climbers, I realized we weren't just searching for lost hikers. We were walking into something none of us fully understood. Next up, I need to tell you about the first real sign that something was seriously wrong. Those footprints, the abandoned gear, the silence that didn't make sense. That's where the story really starts to twist. Asterisk, we were already deep into the search when the first real sign hit me like a gut punch. At first it was subtle footprints in the snow, but not just any footprints. These were 3 sets, spaced oddly, like whoever made them wasn't walking in a straight line but drifting, maybe even hesitating. What sent a chill down my spine wasn't that alone, though. It was where those footprints ended. They stopped dead at the edge of a narrow ledge that dropped into a shadowy crevasse. No scramble back up, no sign of slipping or falling, just gone. Then we found the gear. One of the packs was lying on its side, straps undone, some contents scattered, but not in the way you'd expect from a struggle or a fall. It was almost like someone left in a hurry, but calm, like they were led away, not chased. The ropes were still coiled neat, the ice axes planted upright in the snow. Nothing was broken or torn, and there wasn't a single mark on the snow around. It to suggest a fight. There's silence out there, the kind that stretches too long, seemed to swallow all the noise the gear should have made if things had gone sideways. The strangest part was the complete lack of human sound. No voices, no yelling for help, no radio chatter. Even the wind died down around that spot, like the mountain itself was holding its breath. You start thinking about all kinds of scenarios. Did they get spooked by something? Did they leave willingly? And the silence turns from eerie to downright sinister when you realize that whatever took, those climbers left no trace beyond those footprints and their gear. There was a weird feeling of wrongness that I couldn't shake. The kind that makes you double-check your own senses. My radio buzzed with nothing but static, and the night seemed to press closer, colder. I looked up and noticed the stars had vanished, blocked by a thick, unnatural cloud cover that seemed to coil just over the peak, like a shroud. I swear I heard something then, a faint noise that didn't belong. Not a howl or the crack of shifting ice, but something softer. A whisper, maybe. I called out, but only my own voice echoed back. The others didn't hear it, or maybe they did but didn't want to say. We pushed forward, but every step felt heavier, like the mountain was warning us to turn back. Those footprints, the untouched gear, the silence, they weren't just clues. They were a message. Something about this mountain, about that night, wasn't right. And that's when I realized this search wasn't about finding lost climbers anymore. It was about surviving whatever had taken them. Next, I'm going to tell you exactly what those climbers found, Dad. Night, the moment things shifted from missing persons to something far darker. That's when the real horror begins. Asterisk, what those climbers found up there on Mount Rainier isn't something I ever expected to come across in my years as a ranger. It wasn't a storm gone wrong, or a broken rope, or even some natural hazard. It was something else, something that still haunts me when the night gets too quiet. We discovered it when we followed the trail of footprints that led away from the edge of that ledge, deeper into a section of the mountain most climbers avoid. The air grew heavier, the cold biting sharper, and the silence around us thickened like a blanket smothering any sound. Then, just off the beaten path. We found it's an area where the snow was stained dark, almost black, like a shadow soaked into the ice. The thing itself wasn't easy to spot at first. It was twisted and still, partially hidden in the snow, but enough to make your skin crawl. I won't go into graphic detail, but it was clear that whatever it was had been there for a while. Not a typical mountain hazard, but something unnatural. The way the ice and snow curled around it made it seem like the mountain had been trying to hide it, to swallow it back beneath the surface. But what really chilled me was the feeling we got standing there like we had disturbed something that was better left alone. The silence shifted into a low hum in my ears, and the air around us seemed to pulse with a cold that wasn't just from the weather. One of the guys whispered that it felt like the mountain was alive. Watching us was something that wasn't human. We took photos, logged everything, and tried to make sense of what we were seeing, but no report or theory could explain it. We were ordered to keep quiet, to lock away the details in official reports. But I can't pretend it didn't mess with my head. That thing wasn't just a remnant of a bad climate, it was something else entirely. Something ancient, maybe, something that didn't belong. I remember looking back at the trail we'd taken, realizing the climbers had come this way willingly. Not running, not panicked. Whatever they found didn't scare them off. They followed it deeper into the mountain's grasp. And that's the part that sticks with me. The thought that they might have been drawn in, pulled by something that called to them in the dark. That night, Mount Rainier wasn't just a mountain, it was a trap, a living, breathing thing with secrets we weren't meant. What I'm about to tell you is something that still makes my blood run cold, even years later. When we stumbled on that spot where the snow was blackened and the air felt heavier, what we saw wasn't just strange or unsettling. It was outright wrong. Like something ripped straight out of a nightmare. I don't have the words to describe it perfectly because it didn't look like anything that should exist in this world. It was a shape, but not one made by nature. Part of it was twisted metal, maybe from some old climbing gear, but intertwined with something organic, something slimy and pale that shimmered in the moonlight like wet skin. Its eyes, or what looked like eyes, were deep pits of shadow that seemed to suck in the light instead of reflecting it. It wasn't moving, but the way it rested there, half buried in the snow, felt like it was just waiting for us to notice. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up, that primal fight-or-flight kicking in hard. I wanted to turn and run, but my legs were frozen, caught between fear and disbelief. I've seen a lot in my time on the mountain, but nothing that came close to this. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't human. It was something else. Something old. Something that belonged in stories people tell around campfires when they want to scare kids. The air grew colder still, almost painfully so, and a low hum filled the silence around us. I swear it was like the mountain itself was warning us, telling us to back off before we made things worse. But we couldn't just leave. We had to know what had happened to those climbers. Had they seen this thing? Did they get too close? Did it reach out to them? Those questions gnawed at me, but the only answer was the eerie stillness pressing down on that frozen spot. We backed away slowly, trying to keep calm, but the tension was thick. I could hear whispers of doubt in the group, murmurs that maybe we were seeing things, losing our minds up there. But the blackened snow and the broken gear told a different story. Something had happened, here's something no one alive really understood. That night, the mountain was no longer just a place of ice and rock. It had become a shadowed realm where things beyond human comprehension lurked. And whatever that thing was, it wasn't just a freak accident or a lost hiker's misfortune. It was a warning, a glimpse of something that shouldn't exist. And yet, there it was. Next, I'll tell you about how the mountain itself seemed to react after we found that thing, how the weather shifted, the sounds changed, and the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Because the mountain wasn't done with us yet. After we backed away from that spot, something changed, like the mountain itself was shifting under our feet. The air got colder, sharper, almost biting through the layers of our jackets. The wind picked up, but it wasn't the usual howl or gusts you expect on Rainier. This was different. It was slow, deliberate, almost like the mountain was breathing around us. Watching, I remember hearing noises that didn't belong, soft crunches and faint scraping sounds echoing off the cliffs. But when I swung my headlamp toward them, there was nothing there. Just empty snow and rock. The silence felt alive, thickening with each second we stood frozen in place. You know that feeling when you're sure you're not alone, but you can't see anything? That's what it was. It wasn't paranoia, because even the guys with years of experience were looking over their shoulders, eyes darting into the shadows. The sky, which had been clear just moments before, suddenly clouded over, swallowing the stars and casting a heavy gloom that settled down like a wet blanket. The temperature dropped so fast my breath came out in ragged gasps. We were surrounded by shadows that weren't natural, shapes that seemed to flicker just beyond the edge of the light. I swear I caught glimpses of movement, quick and jerky, like something watching us from the rocks. Radio static jumped back to life, but the messages were garbled, broken. It wasn't interference from storms or equipment. It was something else. Something that felt intentional. Like the mountain itself was jamming our signals, keeping us cut off from the outside world. Every now and then, I thought I heard voices, whispers carried on the wind, but when I turned to listen closer, they'd vanish. Just the mountain playing tricks, or so I told myself. We pushed on, but the weight of that night pressed on us hard. The path we'd followed earlier now felt unfamiliar, dangerous. The snow shifted underfoot in ways that didn't make sense, eyes cracking faintly like distant screams. My fingers went numb, and a deep chill crept into my bones that had nothing to do with the cold. The feeling of being watched grew unbearable. I caught myself scanning every shadow, every rock face, waiting for something to step out. I could see the tension in the others, the way their eyes flicked around nervously, how their voices dropped to hushed tones. We weren't just searching for climbers anymore. We were trying to survive whatever the mountain had woken up that night. That's when I realized that Mount Rainier wasn't just a place you traversed to force, alive and aware. And when you stumble on its darkest secrets, it pushes back in ways you can't predict. Coming up next, I need to share what happened when the authorities got involved, the extraction, the orders we were given, and the silence that was enforced. Afterward, because after that night, some things don't get reported, and some truths stay buried deep. Asterisk, after what we found and the way the mountains seemed to push back that night, things got complicated. The moment word got out, the higher-ups swooped in fast. Helicopters cutting through the cold night air, more rangers showing up. And then the suits, the ones who don't spend much time on the mountain but sure know how to shut things down when the press starts sniffing around. I'll be honest, there was a thick wall of silence that dropped over everything after that. The official story was tight and clean, a routine search and rescue with no sign of the missing climbers. But we all knew better. What we saw, what we felt up there, wasn't something you just file under missing persons and forget orders. Came down quick and clear. Keep quiet, don't talk to the media, don't share details outside the team. No photos, no reports beyond the bare minimum. It felt like someone was trying to sweep it all under the snow and ice to freeze the whole thing out of existence. I get win-mass panic, liability, bad PR, but that didn't make it any easier to swallow. There were hushed conversations in the ranger stations, coded messages passed under breath, and a constant feeling that we were being watched, not just by whatever haunted the mountain, but by the people who wanted us to keep this under wraps. It's a weird kind of pressure, knowing that the truth you carry can't be told, but that it's still out there, waiting. I caught myself replaying everything. Again and again, the blackened snow, the footprints that ended too cleanly, that thing. And the silence that followed felt heavier every time. Nights in the station were the worst. The radios would suddenly cut out or buzz with static, and you'd swear you could hear whispers drifting in from the dark woods outside. Some guys stopped, taking their shifts on the mountain altogether, shaken in ways they couldn't explain. But me, I stayed. Because if I didn't hold on to this story, who would? Who would warn the next climbers, the next rangers? That's the weight I carry with me now. The knowledge that some secrets on Mount Rainier are better left alone. But some need to be told, no matter the cost. Next, I'm going to share how all of this still haunts me, the nightmares, the guilt, and why, even now, years later, I'm still watching the mountain with a wary eye. Because once you've seen what I saw, it never really leaves you. Asterisk. Even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling that night left embedded deep inside me. It's not just the memory of what we found, or the strange silence that fell over the mountain after. It's the way it's haunted my dreams, crept into the eddies of my waking thoughts, and twisted the way I see Rainier forever. Sometimes, when the wind picks up just right and the night gets to still, I swear I can hear whispers riding the breeze. Faint voices calling out from the shadows, pulling at something deep inside. I wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, with the echo of those empty footprints and the hollow eyes of that thing burned into my mind. It's like a shadow that won't let go. I've had moments where I question if I'm losing it, if the mountain got into my head, or if the silence I felt out there cracked something open inside me. But the thing is, I'm not alone. Other rangers who were there, they don't talk about it much. But when you catch them off guard, you see the same haunted look in their eyes. We all carry this weight, the burden of knowing what's lurking beyond the trail markers and summit signs. Guilt. It's a big part of it too. Guilt, because no matter how hard we searched, we never found the climbers. Guilt because I keep wondering if there was something we missed, something we could have done differently. I replay the scene in my head, questioning every decision, every moment. It's like a loop that won't stop, and it drags you down. Sometimes I catch myself staring up at the mountain when I'm off duty, feeling that old unease wash over me. That peak, so majestic and inviting by day, turns into something else when the sun sets, something darker. And I know, deep down, that whatever took those climbers still lingers there, waiting for the next people to wander into its territory. I tell this story not because I want to scare people, but because I have to. Because ignoring it doesn't make it go away. And maybe, just maybe, if more people know the truth, they'll be a little more careful, a little more respectful of what's really out there. Next, I'm going to give you a final warning, the kind of message I wish I could shout from the mountaintops, but have to whisper instead. Because the mountain isn't done, and some things you just don't want to mess with after dark. Asterisk, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this story, it's that Mount Rainier isn't just some beautiful backdrop for a weekend hike, or a thrill-seeker's conquest. There's a darkness up there that's older than any of us, a presence that watches and waits, patient and unforgiving. And whatever that thing is, the one we stumbled on that night, it's still out there. It's still watching. I'm not trying to scare you for the sake of it. Hell, I wish I could say it was all just a weird night, a trick of the cold and the altitude messing with our heads. But that's not the truth. The truth is, some places hold secrets that don't want to be uncovered, and Rainier, it's one of them. So, if you're thinking about heading up there, or anywhere like it, do yourself a favor and respect the mountain. Don't push past your limits, don't ignore the signs, and for God's sake, don't go wandering off the trails once the sun dips below the horizon. Because once darkness settles in, the mountain changes. It stops being a place of adventure and becomes something else entirely. Something that doesn't take kindly to intruders. And if you ever find yourself out there at night, feeling eyes on you, hearing whispers carried on the wind, don't look back. Don't answer. Keep moving and get out as fast as you can. Because the last thing you want is to become another story someone tells around a campfire. A cautionary tale for the next group of climbers who think they can beat the mountain. This isn't just a warning. It's a plea. From someone who's seen what's lurking in the shadows and lived to tell the tale. The mountain's got its own rules, and if you break them, there's no telling what'll happen. And remember, the silence after dark. That's not just the absence of sound, it's a warning. So keep your head on a swivel, trust your gut, and whatever you do, don't ignore it. Coming up next, I'll leave you with a closing line, one that sticks with you long after the story's done, something that keeps the fear alive just enough to make sure you never forget. Asterisk, you know. There's this thing about fear, it's not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, like a shadow at the edge of your vision that you can't quite shake. It sticks with you, gnaws at you, and doesn't let go. That's how this whole thing with Mount Rainier feels for me. Like a whisper in the dark that keeps calling me back, even when I don't want to listen. I remember walking away from that mountain that night, feeling like something was watching me. Not just from the trees or the rocks, but something deeper, something ancient and patient. It's like the mountain itself holds its breath, waiting for the next foolhardy soul to stumble onto its secrets. So here's the last thing I want you to think about before you turn off this video and go back to your day. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't what you see or hear, it's what you don't. The silence that falls too heavy, the footprints that disappear without a trace, the cold that sinks into your bones and never leaves. Mount Rainier still stands there, tall and unforgiving, with its hidden corners and shadowed ledges. And somewhere up there, whatever we found that night is still waiting, watching Dot. And if you ever find yourself out there when the sun goes down, remember there's some things on this mountain were never meant to be found, and some things don't. Like being disturbed. So yeah, keep your head on a swivel, your heart steady, and your mouth shut. Because in the end, the mountain always wins. That's the last I'll say about it.